This is the Cereal at Midnight podcast. My name is Heath Holland, and this is going to be an episode unlike any that I've posted on the Cereal at Midnight podcast feed before. Some of you guys don't even know that there's a Cereal at Midnight podcast feed. I'm recording this for YouTube as well. I'm doing like a video version of this. But in October of 2022, I launched the podcast feed, and you can download the podcast everywhere that you get podcasts. I mean, it's Apple Podcasts, and I'm on Spotify, all the places that you get podcasts. The Cereal at Midnight podcast is there. The reason that I did that is because I had recorded an interview with someone that went about an hour, right? And he goes, at the end of it, he said, so where is this going to air? Like, is this going to be on a podcast or YouTube? I was like, it'll be on YouTube. He said, oh, well, I wouldn't watch it. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, it was like an hour long. I wouldn't watch something that's an hour long. It's YouTube. I want to be in and out. Now, he's right. You know, YouTube is really pushing shorts, and they're pushing those short discussions, right? It's ironic, too, because YouTube has the potential. They're the only platform that has long-form videos. You could post a 3-hour video if you wanted to, and that's a strength, not a weakness. But they're pushing these small conversations because they want to compete with the other platforms. Also, we're living in a short attention span society, so it made sense to me, and I did create the audio feed to be a home for the longer form discussions. Frank Tarzi, my first interview with Frank Tarzi was the first episode on the podcast feed. And I'll tell you a little bit about that too. So he had only agreed to do an audio recording. He did not want to be on camera. And I was okay with that. I mean, I wasn't happy about it because YouTube was my platform. But I understood it. And so we did it. But, over the way we recorded it, I did have the video for it. And when we were done, I said, are you sure that I can't use the video for this? Because I think people would really connect with you if they could see you. And he was like, you know what? Go ahead. So that was the beginning of my relationship with Frank Tarzi and Kino Lorber and doing these repeated conversations. I think we've done 4 now, with obviously the promise for more. The thing about the Cereal at Midnight podcast feed is I was consistently using that feed for those long-form conversations with creators and distributors and industry people, industry insiders and executives and film preservationists, professionals, really. And from time to time, someone from the fan community, someone from the film fan community. But usually promoting someone, or talking to someone who was there to promote a product. And I don't know, as 2025 has dawned, I've seen this coming for a while, but I'm only now ready to do something about it, I guess. I look back and I see how much promotion I've given to other companies and to other people. And it is not always a two-way street. And when the promotion stops, they don't talk to you anymore. There's certain entities out there. I mean, it really is a one-way street with a lot of these companies. And so I'm seeing the value. I wish I'd seen it years earlier, but the importance of getting my own voice out there and talking about the things that I care about, being honest, being transparent, with less of a focus on consumer products. And the thing about it is the consumer products are what get the views. They get the clicks, they get the hits, because that's who we are. And that's what the algorithms are promoting. So, but they don't care about you, right? So I'm seeing this thing, I'm 8 years into Cereal at Midnight now, and I'm seeing that I should have been developing more of my own voice and my own personality outside of promoting other people's stuff. And so here we are. This is what's going on right now. So I don't know how often I'm going to do this. I don't know that it's always going to be on video. Here's the thing, is like if I record video, the microphone that I use is not as high quality as if I was just recording audio. But if I was just recording audio, obviously there's not a video component for that. And I could do both at the same time and then edit it together, but that's a lot of work. And I don't know that I want to do that. So really, this is sort of a canary in the coal mine to see how an audio podcast of just me talking about what I care about and what's going on would sound like, what it looks like, what it sounds like, how it goes. So thanks for checking this episode out. It's an experiment, but I feel good about it. And I've actually put out on social media, just right before I hit record on this, I put out some posts saying, after 80 something episodes, I think it's been 80 episodes that I've uploaded to the podcast feed. I'm ready to start going solo on some of these and talking about what I'm interested in, what I'm struggling with, what I'm watching, giving my opinions. And I should also mention opinions. This should be obvious. It should go without saying. You are not going to agree with everything that I say or everything that I think. But I don't ask you to. I don't need you to agree with everything that I think. I think obviously there's like this tribalism thing that's going on. It happens in fandom. I've been, as a kid growing up and like a sci-fi nerd and a comic book nerd, the tribalism was always there. But man, it's gotten real bad in the age of the internet and with all these social media platforms and everything. It's this idea of like, well, if I don't like what you have to say, I can just turn you off. I can just mute you or block you, and I never have to hear something that I don't agree with again. That's dangerous, right? Because if you don't hear things that are outside of your opinion base or your purview or whatever, you do run the risk of ending up in an echo chamber. And how do you discover new things? How do you discover new perspectives? But again, you don't have to agree with it, but it's good to get some outside perspective from time to time. So all that to say, in 2025, I am really working to develop myself as the product. You realize that, you talk about you talk about movies, you talk about Blu-rays, you talk about film restorations, you talk about records, you talk about whatever. They're all something that someone else created. It's not your voice. It may be your voice, but you're promoting something from someone else. And so I'm exploring every avenue now. I'm, do I start writing books? If I did write books, would anyone buy them? Because so much of my audience comes from YouTube. Do they have the interest in sitting down and reading a book about what I think about movies or my own, film journey, the path that led me here? There's so many things I could write about, but I'm like, well, is there a point? So this is all, steps. I'm taking steps. 2025 is a year of evolution for me to get further to the place that I want to be. Less of other people's stuff, other people's products. OPP, are you down with OPP? Not really. To get to where I want to be. So here, that's the first episode. This is not all that it's going to be. I'll still talk to creative people. It will continue as it has been, but there'll be more of me in there. So, that's a good entry point for this. And I did have some things I want to talk about in this episode. I kind of want to talk about where I'm at with my media buying habits, where I'm at, like what's really catching my passion now. And I guess I also want to talk a little bit about the Oscars, because the Oscar nominations have come out. And as I generally do, I've seen a lot of backlash, people saying like, all these movies are terrible. I thought I'd talk a little bit about my thoughts about that. So, but where should we start? Let's start with collecting, because I think that's the thing that I'm probably most known for, which is not always great, because anytime you have an opinion, when you build an audience that comes to you for collecting talk, when you start to give opinions about things, there it is again, the opinions, people get real mad when they don't agree with you, because they're like, well, I like this guy. I often agree with this guy and he shows me things that I want to buy, but I don't agree with this opinion at all. And then they get really upset. And I've had so many people tell me, listen, you're great as long as you're showing the stuff, but when you start elaborating on it, don't do that. Like, so you really just want me to be a commercial for things. And then that was never the goal. And my Lord, that's actually, that's creative death. What a terrible fate that is. I'll tell you guys, I am really, the thing that is floating my boat now, as my collection is largely out of control. I have been purging. I've been getting rid of a lot of stuff. Last week alone, I sold, I think about 80 titles from my collection. One of them was in a huge bulk lot with, I think, 70 Blu-rays in it. I put that on the CerealAtMidnite eBay store. And there was more than that. I mean, I'm putting things on eBay all the time. I'm just realizing where I'm at. And I think it comes with middle age, probably, because I am middle aged now, is realizing that you have limited time. And limited time, limited space, and limited money is the thing I always say. But the time thing is really what I'm facing. Because I'm like, if I watched one movie from my collection a day for the rest of my life, I don't think I'd be able to get to everything that I own. Again, there are things in my collection I will never watch again because I do not have time. And so what does it benefit me to have these things? If obviously you want your favorites, you want prestige films, you want beautiful special editions of things, but I'm going through a lot of this stuff and I'm like, am I ever going to watch, you know, Bullet to the Head, will Sylvester Stallone again? I mean, maybe, but if I do I need to own it, or can I just rent it somewhere? You know, I could digitally rent it for $3.99. You know, do I need that? There's things in my, do I need this? This is kind of what I'm asking myself. As I mean, really, and I to be clear, this is not some sort of a pious thing. I'm not holier than thou. It is a mess. My house is a mess. My house looks like a hoarder's house because I guess I am essentially a hoarder. And the media, I mean, we have media in the living room. We have media in the obviously, like, I record my videos in the collection room. So I've got media, like, there's so much media on the floor, I can barely get to the place where I sit and record my videos. It's in the living room. It's in the TV room. It's in the bedroom. It's everywhere except the bathroom. And if it ever goes into the bathroom, oh my goodness, they're going to have to come film a show about getting it all out. They're going to have to cut the roof off to get me out. I don't know. I don't want to deal with that. And you know, somebody emailed me the other day and they were like, you know, they're going through some life changes and they have this big collection and they can't deal with it. They needed some help dealing with it. And I had mentioned to them that I was downsizing. And they said, well, that's a smart thing to do because then you won't end up where I'm at. And I see that, you know, there's a documentary. When I went to Cinecon 2024, I went to Cinecon. I got to present Song of Arizona, the Roy Rogers film with Charlotte Barker from Paramount. Wonderful festival, wonderful experience. But they showed a film there called Film is Dead, Long Live Film. I believe that's the title of it. And it was about film collectors, not disc collectors, but film collectors, canisters of film, 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter, 35 millimeter, canisters of film. And these people have, in some cases, saved movies because the studios in the 60s and the 70s, and I guess even into the 80s, were throwing this stuff out. They were throwing away like prints of films and negatives were being lost. And these film fans had it. And there's even stories that I've heard from people that I know about going on these illicit film runs. You know, like there's a collector in Arizona and he's got a barn with prints in it. And they go on a truck, right? Like, you're not supposed to have this stuff. So they have to sneak it. You cover it. And, like, it's basically like smuggling contraband. But the contraband is film prints. And so, and the studios would prosecute some of these people, meanwhile needing them to save the film. It's wild. It's a fantastic documentary, but the story ends with a lot of these people realize, you know, they're in their 70s or they're in their 80s and they can no longer deal with it. They can no longer deal with the burden of carrying canisters of film around. It's taken over their whole house. And so it was sobering and it was sad to see these people with trucks pull up to the house and they go in and they just try to get the film out because the person that owns it can't deal with it anymore. Physically, mentally, they're old, they're elderly, they're infirmed, and they're surrounded by stuff that has become a trap. And I don't want to end up like that. You know, but I'm there. I'm not elderly, but I'm already there. And I'm like, I've got to purge some of this stuff. So it's an ongoing process, and I'll probably be purging things for years to come. Because listen, guys, I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of comic books that I've been collecting since, 40 years of comic book collecting. I've got, movies, I got VHS, Blu-ray, DVD, records. I mean, you name it. It's everywhere. So, I've pretty much just started a store on eBay, and if you want to pick up some of the stuff, it's a good place that you can do it. But I'm just thinking about collecting, and at the same time, because I suppose of where I'm at with the movie situation, I've been leaning really hard into paperback collecting, which is crazy, right? It doesn't make any sense. What am I, an idiot? what am I, some sort of a moron? I'm like, you're out of room. Let me go nuts with vintage paperback. I say vintage. I mean, the stuff that I'm mostly interested in is the paperbacks pre 1995, really stuff that I might have grown up with and earlier. Because when I was growing up in the 80s, I was born at the tail end of the 70s, and I grew up every glorious minute of the 1980s. But in the 80s, we were surrounded by the past. We were surrounded, obviously, no social media, no internet, so you're steeped in the art and the culture of the 1950s and the 60s and the 70s, right? I would go to the thrift store, and you're looking at paperbacks of $6 Million Man, or all the stuff that vintage science fiction, Arthur C. Clarke, and all the great science fiction writers. I mean, that's what was there. And maybe some VHS tapes, right? Because this is before, it bears pointing out, this is before DVD. So when you would go media hunting in the 80s or the 90s, you're not seeing the stuff we see now. You're seeing 50s, 60s, and 70s stuff. And for me, that's like a nostalgic, comfortable place. That's I like to visit that place as often as possible. And I was always a reader as a kid. Art and stories were my first love. I without getting too autobiographical, I'm an only child. I lived in an old person's neighborhood where there were no other kids my age. And I spent a lot of time by myself. And that's probably why I value stories as much as I do, because I was a reader and I was a movie fan, and video games and comic books. These stories became my friends. They took me to other places. They gave me empathy for people that I didn't know and situations that I didn't know. That's what I would do, is I would just read stories, and I think that you see that now. I think that made me who I am. So I discovered, I made a video. I went to Nashville, and I went to this place called McKay's, which is this huge media store, and it was just kind of on a whim. I didn't go there to sell anything. I just went there to kind of browse and see it because I'd heard such good things about it. And I made a video about it. You can see the video on the Serial at Midnight YouTube channel. But this place is like a warehouse. I mean, it is huge. It is like the size of a Walmart or something like that. It is this massive store. It really looks like a huge library, but it's all for sale. And so I had gone to the science fiction section, that's usually my first stop, because I was the sci-fi kid, right? In high school, I was always reading, I read The Lord of the Rings, Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, and then I got into Star Wars stuff. And because Star Wars was a steady drip of new material, I was constantly reading Star Wars books because they were coming out so hot and heavy. This was in what we call the dark times, it was even before the THX re-releases. This is, like the early 90s, Timothy Zahn, Heir to the Empire, that kind of that thing. So sci-fi has always been my touchstone. Not horror, not not even mystery, though I've developed an appreciation for those things later. I always start with science fiction and fantasy, and so I go to that section, and there's just wall-to-wall books. Vintage reminds me of my childhood, right? And they're like 50 cents. I think one book that I bought was 5 cents. Most of them were under $1. Now, they weren't all that cheap. If it was a popular title, like if it was Dune, it was like, 15, it's retail, it was like $15 or something like that. But the stuff that nobody knew, the old Daw paperbacks by John Brunner or Joe Clayton or Marion Zimmer Bradley or, Poul Anderson, people like that, they were like $1 or less. And I just went nuts. And I guess I get that consumer thrill, that buzz that you get when you go shopping. That's why we do a lot of what we do, right? It's the thrill of the hunt. It's the buzz that you get from finding something cool. Will you ever watch it or read it? That comes later. But I'm well aware, after what I've been doing for as long as I've been doing it, it's the thrill of the hunt that we love. Having it is not nearly as much fun as finding it are buying it. We get a buzz from consumerism, and I sure do. That's what I'm telling you guys. Like that kicked me off on a paperback collecting tear that is still going on. It's been months now, and like at least once a week, I'll duck into one of the big media stores in my own town. I'll duck into a thrift store, and I'm just looking for books that, and I'm reading them. To be clear, I'm not just collecting them and putting them on a shelf, but that because I can only read so much. I can only read a few books a week. When I was younger, I could knock out a 300-page book in 2 days. I look back, I have records of what I read starting in 2004. I mean, I was an adult. I was married and out of the house in 2004. But I started keeping records of what I was reading, and I was reading like 50 to, I mean, probably more than that. I was reading a book really every 2 to 3 days. I was completing a new book. So I'm not quite as fast as that now, but I can still read a book. I can read a few in a week, but that's still, they're coming in a lot faster than I can keep up with. But I really do, like, I love looking at the vintage arts on the covers. I have a Kindle. I love reading on the Kindle. I'm not one of these anti-digital people. And that's probably an episode for this podcast later, is learning to embrace digital in addition to the other physical forms, because there's so much it's so much cheaper to have it digitally. And in some cases, digital is not only the best version, it's the only version. So I'm not anti-digital, but I don't choose one or the other. Like I'm telling you guys, I'm buying hundreds of vintage paperbacks. So I'm not being like, oh, I'm only digital. No, I'm everything, everything, everywhere, all at once. Physical movies, digital movies. If I need to rent something, if I don't have to own everything. If I can watch something on streaming to see if I like it, I'll do that first. But I'm buying these books, and the cover art is so beautiful. Fully painted cover art by Boris Vallejo or Frank Frazetta or a million other artists. And when you look at them on a Kindle, or even not just even on a Kindle, but if you look at them in a modern pressing, I mean, the art is just generic. It just lays there. In some cases, it's basically text on a black background. There's nothing there, But you go back to these 80s and earlier books, and you've got fully painted environments, and you've got barbarians that are glistening, and their swords are like chipped and bloodstained. I mean, it is incredible. And so to look at these pieces of art that really have gone away, it's a beautiful thing. And so there is clearly a physical element to that fandom. I mean, I like to smell them. I am putting them all in the bags, the protective sleeves. So I guess the next thing that I need to do is get a place in the house, which is, I've just explained to you, is going to be a challenge because there really is no place. But find a place in the house where I can display them, and maybe I could, talk to you guys about paperbacks in front of my paperback collection. That'd actually be really cool, but that's a distant goal because I have no idea how to achieve that now. And it's not necessarily a new thing, because you guys know, if you've been with the channel, if you've been with me for a long time, I went down a Mac Bolan, the Executioner rabbit hole, Don Pendleton a couple of years ago, vintage Ian Fleming James Bond pressings, the early, the 60s paperbacks for those, and the 50s too, I guess. I've always loved paperbacks because I come from books, right? Books were one of my first loves, but I have really just gone nuts. And like just yesterday, 2 days in the last 4 days, I went paperback hunting. I guess it's an addiction. But the thing is, you go to your usual spots and they don't turn the inventory over that often. So that's where I'm at with my paperback collecting. So, I'd be happy to talk more about that if you want to hear more about that. But, what I'm reading. So I should tell you, I guess, what I'm reading. So there was an author called Mike Resnick who wrote some really interesting, kind of unconventional books. The ones I'm reading right now are the Galactic Circus. It's a quadrilogy. It's 4 books. First book is called Sideshow. The second book is called The Three-Legged Hooch Dancer. And they're very, it looks like they're going to be fun alien, like carnival books. they're pretty dark. They're actually kind of dark and sad, but I'm enjoying them because they do have a like a what's the word that I'm looking for? Like an acerbic quality to them. But I'm reading this, so I'm halfway through that series. I read a really interesting book called The Devil on the Road, or maybe it's just Devil on the Road. And that's a time travel book about this guy. It takes place in England. Believe it was written in the 70s. 78, I believe. And this guy is on a motorcycle. He's a college student and he's on a motorcycle and he ends up stranded in the country. And there's a cat and a barn and a storm, and he goes inside for shelter, and when he wakes up, he's in the 1600s, and basically he's time traveling back and forth. It takes him a while to figure out how this is happening, but to the time of the witch hunts, the English witch hunts, and basically the real Witchfinder General. So it's teaching history about the Witchfinder General in the guise of this time travel thing. And I loved it, and I actually want to do more research about the real Witchfinder General. The movie with Vincent Price is a great, pretty good adaptation of that story, but there's a real man behind that who wasn't doing it because he believed in his cause. He had no faith. I don't even think he believed in God or the devil. He was doing it for money. He was having people hanged and burned because it was profitable. And it's horrifying and fascinating at the same time. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there to discover and a lot of great stories. And once you engage with some of these stories, they fire your imagination in these creative ways and they make you want to pursue different avenues. And I still get that experience when I go to the movies. You know, I've learned that a certain subset of my audience is not interested in having conversations about new movies. They live exclusively in a place of nostalgia. And I'm not condemning that because I understand it. I just explained my nostalgia, that I'm actively pursuing my nostalgia, right? But I am also still in the movie theater 2, sometimes 3 times a week. And I should say also, because of my AMC A-List membership, I get to do that. I pay $20 a month. Anytime people go like, well, I can't afford to go to the movies. I'm like, well, do you have a chain like AMC? Because they have these programs that you should definitely look into. I pay $20 a month and I can see 3 movies a week. That's 12 movies in a month for $20. That's less than $2 a movie. And you can see them in IMAX. And you can see them in 3D. It's incredible. And what I've discovered, because I used to, you go back to the channel a couple of years ago, you see me struggling to find 5 movies to make a best of the year, like a 5 best movies of the year list. And be like, hey, I just didn't connect with a lot of it. Well, part of it's because I was not seeing most of it. I was seeing some of it, largely the big, dumb tentpole movies that I don't really connect with anymore. That's what I was seeing and not connecting. And then go like, well, they're not making a lot of great stuff. Well, they are making a lot of great movies, but a lot of people aren't seeing them. And when you remove the financial barrier to seeing these movies, you're left with just the joy of the movie itself. It doesn't even have to be joy, but the experience of seeing the movie as it is without needing to have to justify it, right? And if I can go into a movie without having seen the trailer at all, if I can go in just completely blind, that's the best experience of all. So I went to see The Brutalist knowing that it was nominated for 10 Oscars, and that's an expectation because you're like, well, it's probably going to be good. It's going to be this thing, right? Because it's going to, high prestige performances. It's going to look good. It's going to sound good. It's going to have good performances. But I didn't really know much about the movie. I didn't really know what it was about other than who was in it. And that it was sort of a period piece about about an immigrant and, construction. Brutalism is a style of architecture where you expose the materials that you've created the thing out of. So, you have like exposed beams or pillars or, it's the idea is like, it's revealing things. It's showing you how the thing is held together. And it's a really interesting style of architecture, of design. I should say design more than architecture. But I was unprepared for this movie, and I wrote a review for The Brutalist. It's at cerealatmidnight.com. It's at Letterboxd. It's I put this stuff everywhere I can, hoping that people can find it as easily as possible. You might have to go look for it somewhere. I put it on these sites. People are like, "What do you expect me to go to their site?" I don't know. Like, I gotta click something. Somebody asked me what. Like, I'll post Patreon support, like membership links or whatever, and people will be like, how do I join? I'm like, you click the link. You click the link. Something. I have a friend. My friend JB said that he's like, sometimes you have to leave the house. It's like to have a good time, to experience something. Sometimes you have to leave the house. Sometimes you have to click a link. Sometimes you have to go to a website to look at something. You might actually have to read something. So I posted I have done a full review for The Brutalist. Most of the stuff that I see, I do write reviews for. I thought The Brutalist was, I called it a mountain of a movie. It's all of the things, because it's 3.5 hours. It feels very old school. This is a movie that shot on film. They shot on both 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. It feels classic. It feels like something that was made in the past when a studio like Paramount, or really any of the studios, would have taken a shot on something that was unconventional and grand in scope and complex, complicated. And here's the thing, like, Adrian Brody is the title character, and he is not a great guy. He's a good person he's a survivor. He's a survivor of World War II. He's a Hungarian survivor of World War II. And he has come to America seeking, first of all, survival, but also, the American dream. And the movie is about that. And it's a great performance. It's a stunning performance. I do think he should probably win Best Actor. But it is also really complicated because he does things that I don't agree with. This movie, I like the movie a lot. I have a lot of respect for the movie, but it made me uncomfortable. It did things that I didn't like. The character does things that I don't like. And I think I respect it more because of that, because it is not easy to classify. It is not easily put into this, thing. I hear people say, like, I posted my review and somebody said, I walked out 5 minutes into the movie or something like that. I'm like, well, you don't know what the movie's about then. You saw none of it. I don't understand this. This is the thing I don't understand. Like, you go to have an experience and then you decide to bail on the experience at the very beginning of the experience. You've taken no steps on the journey, or maybe like 2 steps of the journey. This is fascinating to me. Maybe it's my OCD. Maybe it's my own, unique brain composition. When I start something, I feel really compelled to see it through. I want to see how that thing's going to end. I want to see how they do it. And I got to tell you, I don't think I've ever seen a movie that looks like The Brutalist. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that sounds like it. The 10 Oscars are well deserved. And again, it doesn't mean that the movie's like super happy or that it does, it's hard to understand. It's got this epilogue that is confounding until you really start to think about it. And that's the thing, we don't have to do anything, but it benefits us to think about some of these things after we're done and to challenge ourselves with it. Because when I came out of the movie, I was like, well, it was a good movie, except for that epilogue, which kind of ruined the whole thing. But then I started to think about it, and I had some revelations about what it means, and understanding that it is actually, the epilogue kind of makes the movie. But you have to think about it. You have to accept what it's doing. Well, I guess you don't have to accept it, but you have to at least try to understand what it's doing. Again, this is what makes film so interesting to me, is that it's not always neatly packaged. It's not always just like, here's nostalgia for you, have fun. Here's a toy, have fun. Sometimes it asks you to think about it. It requires something of you, and that's not easy. And it's not always rewarding. It doesn't always lead to good things, but when it does, I don't know, I just think that's a good thing to spend time meditating on what the filmmaker was trying to say and on what the characters have done, and interpreting their actions without having your hand held. And The Brutalist did all of that. I do kind of hope that it wins. For Best Picture of this year at the Oscars, we've got Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, which I saw a review at cerealatmidnight.com. It's the Bob Dylan biopic. I really like that one too. I don't love biopics because they often make up so much crap. They just, in lieu of telling a real story, telling you a historical story, they just make crap up. But A Complete Unknown is actually fairly accurate to the events. You know, some of the things that I've seen people, I should say, I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. I have been for decades now. And I was hesitant about A Complete Unknown because I was like, well, they're gonna, you know, lionize the guy. They're gonna turn him into some sort of, you know, Saint Bob. And he's not. He's just the guy. He's a mysterious guy who likes to stay out of the spotlight, but he's just the guy. Talented guy. But they don't really do that. And in my review, you know, there's a scene with Joan Baez, and she's like, Bob, you're kind of an a-hole. And he's like, yeah, I guess so. And I was like, that was when I was like, this movie is not trying to sell me Bob Dylan as a saint. And that was a huge thing for me. Some of the things I've seen people complaining about as being really on the nose and far-fetched are actually very close to what happened. Somebody was like, you know, Al Cooper, like, yeah, right. Al Cooper comes into the session for like a Rolling Stone and just sits at the organ and starts playing. No, that's exactly what happened. He snuck into the studio. He didn't have experience on the organ, and he sat at the organ, and he's on the finished track. That's exactly what happened. I've seen people complaining about that. I'm like, no, that's real. And I've seen people complain. There's been a long debated. Did Pete Seeger try to get an axe at the Newport Folk Festival to cut the power because Dylan had gone electric? You know, they condense certain things, they play with certain things, but I was really impressed with A Complete Unknown. I think it's probably, like, it does deserve a Best Picture nomination. I don't think it's the Best Picture of the year. Conclave's nominated. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I need to see Conclave. I struggle with the subject matter because I just have zero interest in that Catholic papal Vatican thing. But that's not the point, right? The point is to see the performances, to see how they do the thing. You always should give the movie a shot. And see, this is the transparency, right? Like, I'm struggling a little bit with that, but I know that I want to see it. Ultimately, I should see it because I will be better off having seen it than not and just guessing about what I think it's going to be about. I need to take the ride. Dune Part 2, which is kind of surprising to me that that's up for Best Picture. I think maybe that's for the people, see? That's the populist pick, is Dune Part 2. Not that Dune is not a great movie or a great subject matter. It's very escapist, I guess, and I think that the Academy is not perfect. The Oscars are not perfect, and I'll be honest, I haven't watched the Oscars in a long time. I am going to watch them this year because I've seen so many of the movies, and I've loved 2024 at the movies, but, you know, the Academy is what it is. It's a strange beast, and it is the industry rewarding the industry. So when some of these movies, like Amelia Perez, again, I haven't seen it. The biggest strike for me about Amelia Perez is that it's on Netflix, and I don't want to watch a movie on Netflix. I will if I have to, but I do not like the Netflix experience. I heard someone the other day say you either love Netflix or you hate it. I guess I hate Netflix because I don't like what they've done. I mean, they've kind of devastated the industry. And I know they're the streaming service on top, right? Aren't they the most profitable streaming service? But what they've done to the film industry, I mean, it's terrible. And this movie had virtually no theatrical run whatsoever. I always want to see a movie in a theater, so I'm locked into that experience. I don't know, when you put a movie in a box, in a tiny little thumbnail on your screen, and like Netflix looks like YouTube, right? It's just a sea of thumbnails, and you pick the thumbnail, and you go, and you go to the next thing. It is not like what it was like to browse a video store. It's not the same thing. There's no box to pick up. There's no tangibility to it. And this is not a physical versus digital debate. I'm specifically talking about Netflix and how that movie did not really have a chance to be seen outside of streaming it on Netflix. But, you know, old man yells at clouds. That ship has probably sailed. This is just the world as it is now. I'm still here. Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked. So Wicked, you know, I saw the play. I've seen the live version of Wicked twice. I love Wicked. And I was so afraid that, you know, when they first announced Wicked, I was like, really? Really? There's no way you can do that and capture it. And then I found out it was 2 parts, and I was like, well, that's just great, because I'm by nature fairly, though I'm presenting positivity, like I struggle with myself, right? I struggle with myself. Sometimes the good wins. It doesn't always. And I'm presenting that to you guys. Like, this is just me. Like, I don't have all the answers, and I'm kind of an a-hole sometimes too. I am inflexible and middle-aged and grumpy, and I know what I like, and it would be so easy to just sink into nostalgia and go like, well, the movie will never be as good as the musical, so why bother? But I did go see it kind of begrudgingly on opening weekend, and I was so protective of the musical version. The film version of part 1, because we haven't seen part 2, but the film version is everything that I loved about the musical version, but more and better. And I've seen people say, well, that's too long. I was worried about the length. I've now seen the movie in the theater 3 times, and I did not feel the length. I saw it by myself, and then I was like, to my wife, I was like, you have to come see this. She was like, it's almost 3 hours. So she comes to see it begrudgingly, loves it. We take our daughter, who's a teenager and does not want to go do things with us like that. She loves the movie too. So, it was like this domino effect. And now Wicked is coming, it's touring again, and it's going to be touring through here at the end of the year. And I told my wife, I was like, Wicked's coming. The live stage version is coming. We got to go. She's like, I love the movie version so much now. I don't think I want to see the stage version again, because I associate those songs and those performances with Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. And I was like, you know what? I get it. I mean, I'm going to go. I'm going to be there. But Wicked is such a profound achievement of that thing. Huge, big scale musical. It's so funny. The first time I saw it, there were a bunch of young people in the audience, like couples, like teenage couples. And 3 of the couples, so 6 people, left within the first 20 minutes of the movie. I'm like, did you not know it was a musical? Did you not know there was going to be singing? And then the second time I saw it, the audience applauded at the end of the movie. So it was these drastically different experiences. And I don't know. I think, like, if not for... See, I have a hard time saying that Wicked is the best picture of the year, because it is this... It's an adaptation of a book, and it's the book is an adaptation of basically of spins out of the Wizard of Oz. I mean, this stuff's, it's not new. It's not an original thing. I mean, it is an original thing, but Wicked's been around for a long time. It's an incredible production. It's an incredible adaptation. I hope that it's hugely successful. I mean, it is hugely successful. I hope it continues to be successful, because I think Universal has huge plans for Wicked. I've even heard speculation, like, what if Universal built an Emerald City? They built Oz in Universal Studios. Probably not in California, because they don't have room. But, you think of what the Wizarding World of Harry Potter did for the Universal parks. Like, I'm going to Hogwarts. Think about if you could do that with Oz from this movie. Like, I'm going to the Emerald City. I'm going to meet the wizard. Like, there's a ride and you see the wizard. That would be incredible. And I do think that is the plan. I think Universal has big plans. But see, this is a franchise film. This is launching a franchise. And my heart now, where I'm at, middle-aged, grumpy, inflexible, that guy, connects more with original things. With a movie like The Brutalist, which I don't love every bit of it, but I admire it and I respect it, and it challenges me, I'm more inclined to root for that than for a franchise. Because franchises by nature are meant to appeal to the largest group possible. And I think there's something in movies that don't try to appeal to everybody, that aren't for everybody, that are riskier. And I think The Brutalist is that movie. Let's see. Sean Baker for Best Director. Sean Baker for Anora. Brady Corbett for The Brutalist. James Mangold for A Complete Unknown. Jacques Audiard for Emilia Perez. And Coralie Farguet for The Substance. I mean, I got to go with The Brutalist again. Brady Corbett is an incredibly... This guy's in his 30s. And I'm like, how does someone have the vision for this movie? Again, 3.5 hours, shot on film. How does someone that age have the vision for that? But I guess Coppola did. I keep comparing The Brutalist to The Godfather. And if you're like, hey man, come on, pump the brakes. Well, you separate The Godfather from The Godfather's reputation. The movies are actually fairly similar. What they're trying to do, story about immigrants in America, what it means to like business, capitalism, consumerism, discrimination, like all the immigrant experience in the 40s and the 50s. Like both movies have a lot of overlap, but they feel completely different. Best Actor, Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, Timothy Chalamet for A Complete Unknown, Coleman Domingo for Sing Sing, Ralph Fiennes for Conclave, and Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice. It's interesting that The Apprentice is the movie that Sebastian Stan got nominated for, when he'd also made the A24 movie, the name fails me, A New Man, A Better Man. He made this movie where he's basically like he's a horribly disfigured person who gets a procedure done and becomes handsome and changes and becomes, I think, the real monster there. Sort of what's the Jekyll and Hyde kind of a thing is what you guys ever see that Jekyll and Hyde movie with Oliver Reed? It's crazy. Best Actress, Cynthia Erivo for Wicked. Let's see. Carla Sofia Gascon for Amelia Perez. Mikey Madison for Honora. Honora was in my theater for like one showing a day. I need to go see it. Demi Moore for The Substance. Fernanda Torres for I'm Still Here. I think Demi Moore is going to win because I know how the Academy thinks. And they want to reward her for being a woman in the industry. They want to reward her for being a survivor. She's an older actor, an older performer. I think that's not just a nomination for The Substance. I think that's also a nomination for G.I. Jane and for her entire career. You know what I mean? And I think she probably deserves it too. Best Supporting Actor, Yura Borisov for Honora, Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. I still need to see A Real Pain. That was in theaters and I missed it. It's the kind of movie I wanted to see in theaters, but there was like a 3-week span there where I could not, like, I would buy these tickets and I could not make the movie. Like, something would happen in real life. Like, hey, your brakes went out while you were driving. You better get to the shop right now. Like, that happened. Some family stuff, like some illnesses happened. Guy Pearce for The Brutalist, Edward Norton for A Complete Unknown, Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice. For me, that's going to come down to Ed Norton versus Guy Pearce. I think Guy Pearce probably gives the better performance. I love Ed Norton as Pete Seeger. I think he really captured Pete Seeger, and it's a very different role for Ed Norton too. But I think that Guy Pearce was fantastic. This is the last one I'm going to do. Best Supporting Actress, Monica Barbaro. Ariana Grande for A Complete Unknown. She was great as Joan Joan Baez. I said Joan Jett. Different movie. Ariana Grande in Wicked, Felicity Jones in The Brutalist, Isabella Rossellini, Conclave, and Zoe Saldana and Amelia Perez. I don't know, man. I don't know. Whatever Ariana Grande is doing in Wicked is so unique. Like, she has captured Kristen Chenoweth from the stage version, but she's also brought her own thing to it, and it is so, like, it's something else. And but, you know, Felicity Jones was great in The Brutalist too. Monica Barr, I don't know. I really don't know. I have no idea. I guess if you're like, who do I want to win? I think I want Ariana Grande to win. And I think I probably want Cynthia Erivo to win for Best Actress, but I don't think she will. And she's already got a Grammy, right? Isn't Cynthia Erivo an EGOT? Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and a Tony? Isn't she an EGOT? So I don't know. But it's going to be an interesting ceremony this year. We got like a month before it comes on, before it airs for the Oscars. And I don't know, you know, somebody said this is a small list of movies compared to what came out. And that's accurate. 2024 was a huge year at the movies. I mean, there were dozens of great films. Not good films, great films. Kevin Costner's Horizon. Why no nominations for The Bike Riders? Come on, man. That is a small personal film that the Academy should have loved. With a great performance from Tom Hardy, and Austin Butler is good in that. There were many great films in 2024, and most of them are not being recognized. And that's the flaw of the system. That's the flaw of the Oscars organization and how it works and what they like to reward. But it also just is a reminder that you don't just use the Oscars as a guide for what's good. You have to go discover things yourself. Hey, as my friend says, sometimes you have to leave the house. You have to try things that you don't know about ahead of time. You have to take a risk on things. When you put yourself out there, what I've discovered, but going to all these movies, when I put myself out there and just like expose myself to the experience, I'm like, okay, movie, take me where you want me to go. I don't want to steer. I want the movie to take me where the creators, where the filmmakers want to take me. When you do that, I'm usually rewarded for that. I usually have a positive experience. It's an interesting time when we want to control movies. Like, that's not what I wanted. Like, who asked for this? Well, that's not how creative endeavors work. Like, who asked for this? The creator had something they wanted to say and they made that thing. It's weird to think like, I want you to do this and this and this. I hate this movie because it didn't do this. That's just not how I watch things. So I will be watching the Oscars for the first time in maybe 20 years. This has been a long time since I've watched the Oscars because I just had enough. But again, I've seen most of the movies this year and I really want to see what happens, and I want to see what... Yeah, this is after the strikes last year and after the fires, which are still going, after real adversity in Hollywood. I just want to see it. I want to support it and see what happens. All right, I think this is a good place to wind this one down. This has been really longer than I thought it would go. But we've covered a lot of ground, and it feels like a good jumping off point. So we'll see where some of these episodes go in the future. You can always reach out to me and let me know if you want my thoughts on a particular topic. But from time to time, I think I will definitely hop on the microphone and just talk about where I'm at and what I'm thinking and what's going on, with the continued goal of developing Cereal at Midnight as a... Did I say this? I was going to do a video about, or maybe not even a video. I wanted to do a project. And this is the thing too, is like, YouTube is no longer the best platform for some of the things that I want to do. It might be a book. It might be a video essay for something else. I'm looking at various opportunities, various platforms for these things. But I was going to do a video about a topic, and I told someone at a company, I shouldn't say, but I told somebody about it, and they were like, who are you going to get to do that with you? I was like, I'm not going to get anybody to do that with me. I'm going to do it by myself. And I think some people don't necessarily see me as the show. They see me as a collaborator. I'm still being credited on some of my audio commentaries as the host of the Cereal at Midnight podcast. Not a film historian, but the host of a podcast. I've been writing about film for over a decade. I've written hundreds, probably thousands of pieces about film. I've now completed 15 commentaries. I've got 4 more that I'm going to be able to talk to you about soon. But I don't know. I have to develop my voice. It is time for me to stop talking so much about other people's creations. Stop talking so much about other people's products, I should say. Selling other people's products who do not return my emails and won't give me the time of day. It should be a 2-way street. It's often a 1-way street. It's time for me to start developing myself. And that's what this is. So thanks for being here. Let me know what you think about future topics. Let me know what you think about the movies that you saw this past year. What's engaging you as a fan? What sort of pursuits are you really pursuing right now? Pursuits are you pursuing? You know what I'm saying. My voice is getting hoarse and I'm kind of worn out now. So thank you guys. I appreciate you. Take care. Till next time, I will catch you later.